Hi, this is Tracy Taylor with the Wasatch Taxpayers Association. We're doing candidate interviews for the 2019 Heber City Council primary. And if you want more information on Wasatch Taxpayers Association, you can go to wasatchtaxpayersassociation.com. Today we have Ron Crittenden. He's an incumbent. And let's start out right now, Ron. Give us a little bit of background about yourself and where people can contact you if they want more info.
Okay, well, I've lived in Heber about 40 years. I have a wife and 7 children. They were all raised here, my children, and only one can afford to even stay here because we let him live in our basement. Oh, he actually has a place now, but he did live there for a while. It's a tough challenge. One of the things I've been trying to work on, I'm on the low income or moderate income housing board, both for the city and the county, trying hard to get a little bit more affordable housing so our youth can afford to stay here. But went to BYU, got a degree in business management, economics and accounting concentration. Moved to Heber shortly after that. Done quite a few different things through the years, but more significantly to this job, I guess, I was the county treasurer for 4 years in Wasatch County. Increased the earnings and reduced the expenses during that period and uncovered some problems, which maybe, whatever, not everyone likes it when they're caught taking money they shouldn't. Them and their relatives get mad at you when you catch them. But that was a period I was called the Wasatch County Watchdog. I'm proud of that. That's your job when you're in charge of watching the money. I then went and worked for Congress for actually 9 years for 2 different congressmen. I was the field representative for all of eastern Utah, and then eventually the state director for Congressman Howard Nielsen. After he terminated his term of office, he decided not to run again. He had served his time, and Bill Orton ran of the opposite party. When he got in, he didn't think he was going to and needed help, and actually I helped him for a year to set up his office. Told him I was very conservative and to stay that way, but if I could make him a better, more conservative Democrat, I'd work toward that, and I did, and we got along fine. And I served more time than either one of us had expected, but I helped him. And so I worked both sides of the aisle, you might say, as far as being broad-minded about those things. He and I got along really well. So after that, I went and was hired as the executive director of the School Trust Advisory Board. And it was their job to redo some of the laws in Utah to help us manage our school trust lands and earn more money for our school children. The school trust lands were given in trust to Utah before they were ever a state. And they were given with the purpose of helping schools. And they kind of drifted toward political agendas. Let's let the cattlemen graze them cheap and hunt and so forth, and they weren't being used for the schools. Ever since we redid that legislation, it passed the legislature unanimously, and we've earned tens of millions, hundreds of millions probably by now of extra revenue, so I'm proud about that.
Well, great. Let's get back to Heber City Council. Where can people contact you if they... Are you on Facebook? Do you have a website? You know, where can people find you if they want more information?
I haven't established a web page as of yet. I have tried to weigh in on Wasatch County politics. The last election.
The Facebook page.
The last election, the Facebook page. I'll probably frequent that, and if there's a reason, I'll respond. My email is freemanron1 at hotmail.com, freemanron1 at hotmail.com. I believe we all should be free men, and that's why that's established that way, and it's been my email. You can reach me there. My phone number is 435-654-4880.
Great.
And I answer my cell phones. don't understand these people that buy cell phones so they can have them with them and then they don't answer. But
Great, great. Well, since you are an incumbent, I'm going to ask the incumbents in this race a couple different questions than the people that have never been on the city council. So one of which is, can you tell us about an issue that you've brought in the last 4 years since you've been on the council that you're especially proud of, or at least something that you felt that you spearheaded some issue or some legislation or corrected something within the city that you are feel good about in the last 4 years?
Well, there's been several, but I guess the major one would be that when I discovered getting on the council that there was a freight train running down the road to give us form-based code citywide. I felt like that was absolutely not the right thing to do. When I read that they were not going to allow chain link fences or aluminum siding or just all kinds of things, I just thought that was way beyond what we ought to be doing with people's private property. And I believe I was major instrumental in getting that defeated. It wasn't that I defeated it, it was that I let the public know what was going on, and enough public showed up on that issue that some of the council that were prepared to pass it backed away when they saw a room full of angry people. It was just the wrong thing to do. The Planning Commission had passed it over to us, and they'd worked on it and spent $110,000 for consultants, and the consultants were going to design what you and I and everybody else could do with their private property. And I put a lot of energy in it, and I think I had a lot to do with letting the public know about it so that we could defeat it.
Okay.
It's sneaking back in little pieces, but I'm fighting that too when I can.
Great. And maybe give us one issue or one vote in the last 4 years that you may have rethought afterwards and wished you had voted a different way, or maybe got it wrong when you voted at the time and had second thoughts about it afterwards, or something you regret, let's put it that way.
Well, the main vote I regret was kind of new and believed at that time more what people said than I sometimes do now. I had pledged to slow or limit the growth of our fast-growing population, slow it down a bit. So early on, this subdivision was presented to us. It was going to have quite a few units in it, but they were for senior housing, and there was going to be a facility for assisted senior living, and then nearby some other units for seniors. I was a little suspicious from the get-go. There was kind of some, in shadow relief, some other units that were not described. I asked about them, and they, oh, we don't know yet what's going to be there. But our city planning officer, planner, said, oh, this is very important, even though there's more density from it. We need senior assisted living. I've tried, and they promise, and then they don't do it, and these people are serious, and I need your vote, Ron, I need your vote. And I says, well, I don't like all that increased housing, especially out on the west edge of town. I think we should feather out towards the less dense county, and I believe that, but I went ahead and voted for it. Trusted the developer, trusted what he said he would do, and I voted for it. I don't think it was a wrong vote, except that they don't do what they say sometimes. We didn't have it strictly enough that that's what had to be there. There's a great big for sale sign on the property today. It was never developed for what it was supposed to be. Oftentimes developers come in, they get an up zone, which was the case there. We did a cozy overlay, it's called, just another way to go around zoning, let the developers do what they want. We gave them that, and it didn't develop. We don't have the senior housing. They have the new zone, which I'm going to see that it goes to senior housing or not, because that was the premise of it. But it's for sale. They've got the increased zone. That was my biggest regret. I've been more cautious since, and oftentimes I'm the only one voting against stuff, but if it's for increased density, I've tried to slow the growth as best I could. If I just get 2 more councilmen or 1 or 2 more that could help me, I could slow it. But so far I've been maybe the lone vote quite often.
Well, let me ask you one other incumbent question. So you've served for 4 years. Why are you running again, and why should the people vote you in one more time or at least another time? What do you want to accomplish in the next 4 years, or maybe what have you seen that you thought you need to get back in and you need to get in for another term?
Well, I just see, especially now, we're proposing to annex an area as big as Heber. I keep seeing, I mentioned a few minutes ago about form-based code. I keep seeing them pushing agendas that relate to form-based code. I ask the city council to consider less strict zoning, not more strict. We actually got me and 2 other votes to refer that to the planning commission. They like to plan what to do, so they're not sure they want less, but we're asking them to consider less zoning. If the public knew how many strict requirements there are on a man, woman's personal property, they'd be, I think, appalled. And what that does is the developers can buy it cheaper, and they know how to jump through those various dozens of hoops, and then they get real increased values in what they can gain in the property values. But it takes away the property rights of individuals. And
part of that issue as well is the enforcement of it. I mean, why have all these codes if Heber City doesn't enforce it?
We do not enforce most of our codes. At the beginning of the year, each councilman was asked what we wanted to accomplish, and I said, well, I want to see us take away any ordinances or codes that we are not enforcing. If we haven't enforced them in 2 or 3 years, there's literally hundreds that we haven't enforced. And I've even been told that zoning is enforced by neighbor complaint. Well, I think it's pathetic that the only way we put all these rules, and then only if I have an ornery neighbor do they get enforced. If I don't rat my neighbor out, then we just ignore it.
Okay, we're going to move on. These questions are going to be a little bit quicker. The airport. I think the citizens have a right to know how you feel about the airport expansion. I really want a yes or no answer on some of these, because I feel that we're at this point in the growth of our valley and Heber City specifically that people want to know where the candidates stand on certain issues, one of which is the airport. Do you ever think you could vote for an expansion of the airport? And we're doing a master plan now, I understand that'll take another year at least. What would that master plan have to say for you to vote for an expansion, or would you ever?
In my last campaign, I pledged to not support an expansion. I put forth a resolution that passed, which 3 other councilmen took away after some pushing from the FAA and others that wanted to expand. I still hold by that resolution. The resolution was that we're against, or I'm against, we were against unitedly, I still am, against the expansion of the airport. The problem in part is that if we don't expand the way FAA wants, they'll withhold some of the funding. And so I think it's only fair to let the citizens know that if we don't cooperate with the FAA, it may cost us more to keep the airport. I wouldn't care if the airport disappeared tomorrow. I think there's some benefit, but I think there's more cost to us. The problem is past city councils and mayors and manager have committed to things to the FAA that requires that we keep that airport open in perpetuity. And there's requirements that the runway and other things be of a certain strength, capacity, or whatever. The FAA pays 80–90% of that if we do what they say. If we don't do what they say, we're we are gonna have to pay it. It could cost the citizens. My resolution said is that we would determine how much it would cost to keep it open on our own without FA cooperating with us, and let the citizens know. At the point that came to that, I'd want to have a vote of some kind from the citizens. The FA got all mad and said, it's your airport, you can't ask the citizens. I can ask the citizens whatever I want. And I would want them to know that if we don't expand, the FA pulls the support based on the master plan, then this is what it may cost. And so I think it's a citizen issue in that I know that we're elected to make decisions, but if it's going to cost more, then we need to decide, is the expansion and the noise and everything else the trade-off? And the citizens, I think, I would vote whatever the citizens wanted, period. Well, just as long as they're informed.
Right, and I do have to say, when you first got into office, you read every document that the city ever signed with the FAA, am I correct?
Well, yes, and that's how we discovered our manager, so I didn't know it was in perpetuity. Well, it was pretty obvious when you read the documents.
And so there were decisions made on all these documents over 20 years, but you're one of the few people in the last few councils and mayors and that has actually read all the contracts, am I right?
Well, not only those contracts, but literally hundreds and hundreds of pages of FAA regulations and rules and that I did. I read all of it. I don't even know if I understood it then, but I tried hard. The problem is a lot of the decisions on the airport, because it was favored by some past mayors. In 2003, the people said we don't want to expand it. Mayor Adams was the mayor then, and he loved airports and planes. And on down through to Phillips, they all loved them, and our manager loved it. They did a lot of the decisions, even on the signing of major grants or whatever, were done under a consent calendar with the council. They didn't even discuss it. They just come in and voted for it under consent because the mayor manager told them to.
Okay.
So,
thank you.
Uninformed, I think, decisions by the council.
Yep. Let's move on to the bypass. After the last UDOT meeting we were both at, I got
on to the bypass? I wish there was one to move on to.
Yeah, well, that's true too. But UDOT is going to be doing an EIS study, and they made it quite clear that they are going to choose a few routes. They are going to do it. We've had input. We'll have more input in the future, but I just want a basic question answered. Do you believe we need a bypass? I know there's a contingent in our community that really doesn't want a bypass, and they don't feel we need a bypass. I just want to get a basic feeling from you of whether you think it's necessary, or do you think we can live without one?
Well, again, in my prior campaign for the office I now hold, there were 3 areas of commitment: slow the growth, the airport, and do something about Main Street. I dug right in to figure that out. And Main Street is a UDOT highway. Main Street belongs to the state, so we can't do much about it except work with UDOT and persuade them. I've done what I could, I think. I promoted what I call the hundreds, which is 100 east, 100 west. We took the big dip out of 100 west. We're going to take the dip out of 100 east this year, so that those are more passable streets. If the citizens, the local citizens will recognize you can go down 100 west probably quicker than Main Street. And if our local people could use those, then we don't have to compete with the trucks and stuff. We still have to cross Main Street. Main Street, by UDOT's own definition, has failed. I think if we could get the traffic to go around, my feeling is, from what I've studied it, a big chunk of the traffic, believe it or not, are coming from the Summit County, Park City area to Provo. Mm-hmm. One study a few years ago says 60%. I don't think it's that high now, but it's 40, 50%. It's not the trucks, and they're a problem, but the trucks aren't going to go around unless we make a good bypass, which if we make it, we better make it good. But I believe if we do the west bypass, take them around and down to Provo Canyon, I do not favor moving 189 over onto 13. I do not. Yes, they'll study all alternatives, and I guess even the east side and everything else. I think we ought to push it a little further north, not necessarily into the North Fields, which I know we all love, but there's already a road called 1200 North that's paved and everything, and if you went as far as the other end that hits 1200, and you wouldn't hit wetlands, you wouldn't disturb anything that already isn't a road. That's just, they'll look at all those. It's not going to be up to us. But yeah, I think we should look at a bypass, but I honestly think we need to do more internally on the roads we control.
Okay.
Just to be aware, we have another UDOT road that's becoming quite a big problem, and that's the road to Midway is also UDOT's. And you try to cross first south a lot of days and see how that goes.
Right, right.
So we need to work internally where we can, more than we are.
Okay. The general plan, we're spending a lot of money to update the general plan, which I guess is necessary, and Envision 2050 got a lot of public input. This is a process that's going to take a while, but what I want is an answer from all the candidates to let the citizens know whether they would be willing to enforce the new general plan, and that they won't, you know, if a developer comes in and expects more density, are we going to follow this general plan? Or are we going to allow higher densities when invariably developers are going to come asking for it? I mean, my point is, what's the point of a general plan if we're not going to follow it?
Well, it's even bigger than that. Our old general plan is outdated, but we don't follow it, and we haven't. Even if we'd follow it, we'd be better off. Mm-hmm. The developers want new zones. They want to violate the plan, change the plan. Mm-hmm. I've resisted that the whole time I've been in, 3.5 years. We do not follow it. We ought to follow it. We need a new plan. I am resisting any zone change or annexations until we do the general plan. It seems kind of absurd to me to spend $120,000 for consultants, which we're doing. And I didn't support that either. We have staff, I think, could do it. But we're working on the general plan, and yet we just passed an annexation that plugs a hole in the general plan. We haven't even studied. I believe the general plan would have shown that ought to be commercial, but all the developers doing is letting Ivory Homes build a whole bunch more homes. So I think we ought to stop the annexations and zone changes until the general plan's done. When you do any kind of zoning, you take away personal property rights in favor of the community interest. And in 3.5 years, I've seen us do too much zoning and taking property rights away, but not in the community interest. If you're going to say, let's have zoning and prioritize community interest, then we at least ought to do the community interest. But we're not. We're doing developer interest.
Okay. Let me ask you, I've asked this of every candidate, do you have any conflicts of interest, or have you in the last 4 years since you've been? I know the mayor at every meeting, she asks if there's any conflicts of interest with anything on the agenda, and you know, the council has to respond if they do. And I'm just asking, have there been any conflicts that you've had to?
There's no conflicts. There's been none, except that sometimes I guess I represent the citizens, and the developers and even some of the city staff feel like that, you know, their interests aren't being prioritized like they like. I'm not there as an employment agency. Staff should be paid fair, but they're hired to serve the citizens. I'm not there to serve developers, even though you know, they have property, whatever it was zoned, that we should have them do. But to change zones, up zones, annexations, need to be done in the citizens' interest, the whole community's interest.
So that kind of answered my next question, which is, what do you feel the role of city council is? Is it there to rubber stamp or approve anything staff and the manager brings to the city council, or do you feel all expenditures and policies should be approved by the city council first, and then the manager and the staff enforce whatever you as a council decide?
Well, it's very clear in state statute and so forth that the 5 city councilmen or the legislators of the city, they set policy, they give direction. The administration's job is to carry that out, not the other way around. And we hire a city manager. He's to do what we set as policy, not to direct us, but us to direct him. And I believe that's how it should be. I don't think that's how it's been kind of done. There's a lot of habits that they bring stuff to us and we're to do what they suggest, and we should set policy. We aren't there to administer the day-to-day. That's why we hire the city manager. That's why we hire department heads. But they should follow our policy. And the 5 city councils set policy. They're there. We face election, as we are again, every 4 years, and the citizens can decide whether they like how I voted or not. We've tried to get Heidi and I to have it be on the record how we vote, and the other councilmen have resisted that. Don't know why they don't want to know. I'm happy to face every vote. The one I did wrong, I just addressed. There aren't many others that I feel bad about. None that I feel bad about except that one. I'll stand up to my record. I believe I did what I said I would when I was elected. I believe the role of elected officials is to be honest in their campaigns, tell the citizens what they will do, what they believe in philosophically and everything else, and then do it. And you're often, almost always, privy to information that the general public do not have time to know about. And so if you'll guide your actions by your principles you gave during your campaign, not the platitudes that you thought the citizens want to hear, but what you really believe, and then do those based on the information that's coming at you, you'll make the decisions that you said you would. I don't think you need to go back and back and back to the citizens if you'll do what you told them you'd do when you ran. I think that's not the way it's often done, and I wished in these campaigns we'd have situations where we'd have to face a lot of hard questions. Because, you know, when I was running, my wife come home and she says, "You sound like everyone else on the stage." I says, "Well, watch what happens the next 4 years." And I had people on both sides of me say about the same stuff, because that's what the audience seemed to want. And they voted against me for 4 years now on growth. We've added some 1,700 residential units, and it's been 4 to 1 or 3 to 2, me against that growth and the others for it, even though in the campaigns they were against too much growth. But they're not voting that way. And honestly, I only have 1 vote. I need a couple more councilmen that feel that way to accomplish it.
Well, thank you, Ron. You kind of answered my last question of why people should vote for you. So thank you again. And there will be more interviews here shortly. So try